Hi everyone. Yes, am I live? Yes, I am getting live there. Hello everyone. Hi Sakshi. Hi Saurabh. I'm Rinal. As you can know, I am on live both on Facebook and with Instagram, and I am live on the Indian Express Facebook page too. Um, and this, welcome to the students of Sophia College, Sociology Department, and I'm quite excited on this topic. The reason I choose a topic is, it also keeps me busy. We are in lockdown, and what do you do the whole day? And I've been thinking about it. How do you occupy time? Can you sit doing nothing? And the thing is, as human beings, I think we like to consume things, and I classify consumption in different ways. One is, I have got these three things that human beings need, and as per Hindu mythology, there is Lakshmi, Durga, Saraswati. Lakshmi deals with material things, resources. Durga deals with power and Shakti, and Saraswati deals with intellectual things. So, what do we like to consume? So, let's say you're watching Netflix. What are you consuming? It's Lakshmi. Sorry, Saraswati. It's intellectual. Something is going inside. Entertainment. पहले ज़माने में हम लोग singing, dancing सुनते थे. There were dancing girls, dancing boys, singing, and so that was Saraswati consumption. Or we do drawing or painting, performing arts, plastic arts, the arts basically, Saraswati. And Saraswati is really associated with the arts. So Veena ke saath baithti hai. And then you have Lakshmi. So you want to eat food, you want to keep munching the whole day, you want to drink water, you want to wear good clothes, you want to sit in air conditioning, it is so hot, you want some air conditioning, you want to sleep on bed, all these are material comforts, food, clothing, shelter. तो लक्ष्मी हो गया फूड क्लोथिंग शेल्टर में, सरस्वती हो गया आर्ट्स कल्चर में, फिर दुर्गा पावर कंजम्पशन हम कैसे करते हैं? जब हम लड़ाई करते हैं, when we get bored and we start fighting with people just to keep ourselves busy. Many people, like, you will see me going on Twitter and doing time pass because I have really no work. So just I go there and irritate people and provoke thinking because Durga, your inner power feels activated. You suddenly feel we are important, and it's a very foolish pursuit, but karna padta hai kabhi kabhi. So that's how you pass the time. But I decided also to do this tea time tales, and we did this last year, or season 1, and this is season 2. And last time I did it every day thinking that the lockdown would end very soon, but this time I decided to once a week do proper preparation. And you know what? I have got involved with the UPSC curriculum. I decided to put my energy. See, I am now 50 years old, and I said, what do I do for the rest of my life? Mythology to kar liya, 50 किताबें लिखी हैं. I've made my money, I've given consultations, I have tried to make people aware of Indian mythology and world mythology and its subject, because most of the books on mythology are usually written by Western scholars with a very strong Western bias. तो मैंने उसको Indian, form दिया है. I've given it Indian form. I've tried to explain life using Lakshmi, Durga, Saraswati, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. That's the model that I use even in my lectures, when I give corporate lectures, when I do workshops. Then I said, let me spend, we all talk about Vanaprastha. There's a time in life, Brahmacharya is when you're a student, you're preparing for it. Grahastha is when you're making your money and enjoying the money. And then comes a stage in life where you say that, Vanaprastha. Vanaprastha basically in practical terms means preparing the next generation. Because आप तो जीने नहीं वाले हो 24/7. Only politicians think they are immortal, but normal human beings know that they are going to die. So you pass on your wealth, your knowledge, your skills to the next generation. And so I decided to invest time with the next generation of bureaucrats, the UPSC students. And I wrote this book with Pearson. The Pearsons asked me to do this book. It is called Indian Culture, Art and Heritage. And I decided ki chalo, I will do this textbook in both English and in Hindi. This is my Hindi version. And when I was writing this book, I suddenly realized, how do you study culture? If I want to teach somebody culture, पढ़ाते कैसे हैं? How do you study culture? And I realized the books are just putting together data. ऐसे थोड़ी ना होता है. So there is a method of studying culture. Whenever you, for example, when I go to a museum and I see a work of art, my brain works in a particular way. And I said, let me share it. And then I will tell you how I came to today's topic, Tamil women. Why does it become important? How does it come? कहाँ से आया है? So first thing I will check whenever I look at any historical object, any cultural object, an art form, music, dance, anything. कल्चर से जो भी जुड़ा हुआ है, आर्ट से जो भी जुड़ा है, फर्स्ट थिंग आई विल चेक इज हिस्ट्री. Where, which period of history does it come from? Then I will check which part of geography does it come. Does it come from Assam? Does it come from Odisha? Does it come from Maharashtra? And then I will go into the details of it. The people involved in that creation of that object. So Desha, Kala, Guna. This is the Sanskrit framework. Desha is geography, space. Every material object has to occupy space. So when you see something, ek surai dikha, ek cup dekha, something, you see a seal, it has to have a historical precedent. Then it has to belong somewhere. It has to belong in some time zone. Kala, Desha, geography, and then Guna. It has to have some qualities. So for example, once long ago, in the 19th century actually, a gentleman called Swaminathan Iyer in Chennai found palm leaf manuscripts of poetry which was written in very old Tamil. Very, very old Tamil. And he said, okay, this is from Tamil Nadu. So yes, how old is it? Is it related to Sanskrit? He started studying it. And we discovered what we now call Sangam literature. The old Tamil poetries. A very different world. And I'll tell you why it is interesting. Because when I read whatever little I read on Tamil Sangam literature, I said, how old is this? I realized this is, they said that is between, the oldest form is between 300 BC and 300 AD. It's like lamba range, 500 saal ka range diya mere ko. The oldest poetry, Tamil poetry, comes from this range, like very long range, 500 saal. And then I realized when you talk of when was Ramayana written, they will say the same thing. They will say 200 BC to 200 AD when it was written. When was Dharma Shastras written? 300 BC to 300 AD. So suddenly between 300 BC and 300 AD, you suddenly have Tamil literature being written in the south. You have got Dharma Shastras being written in the north. You have got Ramayana and Mahabharata being put together. And जब आप सोचते हो इसके बारे में, you start wondering, oh my God, what is happening in this period? Why is it writing? What is happening? Why suddenly writing has become clearly very important? And then you realize, oh, of course, when does writing become important in India? When is the first time you see big writing in India? You find it 2,300 years ago. Ashoka makes his edicts. He writes on stone. He writes in a local language. The script he uses is Brahmi. And he puts his edicts across the country. The first time we get written script in India, 2,300 years ago. And this script then becomes very popular, spreads with trading routes across India. And other people start writing. And writing becomes important. And in the Ashokan edicts, for the first time we have reference to South India. Before that, nobody refers to South India. Vedas don't refer to South India. Rig Veda doesn't refer to South India. Samaved doesn't refer to South India. Upanishads don't refer to South India. Dharma Shastra, Bauddhayana Dharma Shastra, which is one of the older Dharma Shastras, refers to Aryavarta as ending near Vindhya, that is Madhya Pradesh. Uske baad wo nahi bolta hai. When it talks of Kalinga, it says this is the country, if you go to Kalinga, please come back and purify yourself because there is not the land of the Aryans. The Bauddhayana. By the time Manusmriti comes, he talks about the whole subcontinent right up to the sea. Which means spreading of ideas are taking place. So, when is South India referred to? First time we find it in Ashoka, pillars. It refers to, doesn't refer to a land, it refers to a people. Remember the difference, land versus people. It refers us to people. Who are the people? It refers to Cheras, Pandyas, Cholas. The great Chera, Pandya, Chola. Similar construct of something to do with the confederacy in the southern part is found in Kharavela inscriptions of Odisha. The king Kharavela also refers to the southern people. We don't know anything about them. Who are these people? We don't know. And then suddenly we find this poetry. The early, what is called Proto-Old Tamil poetry. And it is remarkable, the poetries. It is very different from Sanskrit. Very, very different. I'll give you an example. Not exactly of Tamil. I don't speak Tamil, so I can't claim to be Tamil. But something when I was reading this book, something interesting about language, I will tell you. I speak Marathi. And in Marathi, I suddenly realized there are two words for we. You know, we. Let me write it down. In English, we say we. We. Right? Hum. Hindi mein we will say hum log. Hum log. In Marathi, there is a word called apad. Now, what is apad? Now, apad is means we, and amhi also means we. So there are two words we find, apad and amhi. So what is apad meaning and what is that amhi meaning? So apad means sorry, there's some connection. So apad means all of us, including you. But when I say amhi, I'm only referring to me excluding you. So there are two V's in Marathi. Apad and amhi. Two V's. And I realized similar two forms are found in Malayalam, they're found in Tamil, but they're not found in Sanskrit. They're not found in Hindi. At least I have not come across it. Maybe it exists, but I have not come across it. So I am like, what does it mean? How do we deal with this? And you realize they're different language structures. They're coming from different parts of India. They're coming from different parts of the world. So you suddenly realize that India has different language structures. There is Sanskrit, there is Hindi, there is Dravidian languages, and we didn't know about these Dravidian languages. So now we know about these Dravidian languages, and Tamil speaks these beautiful stories emerge in Tamil Nadu. First part, when you read these stories, the thing which struck me, I mean, grammatical structures, you can read about it. Please do go ahead and read it. And the word Dravid doesn't appear, by the way. The word Dravid comes to us for the first time from the 8th century. Roughly, it is mentioned for the first time by Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya refers to this word Dravid for the first time in the 8th century. Before that, we don't have this word. The details, again, you can Google it and you'll find all these details somewhere or the other. So, what happens is, you are reading these poetries and you suddenly discover something very peculiar. When I read the Rig Veda, I was looking for women. And I realized the Rig Veda mostly talks about men. 90% of the time, almost 95% of the time, it is talking about men. The poets are men, the gods are men, men everywhere. You don't really see women. They appear in the Upanishads, again it's men. Occasionally a Gargi will appear, occasionally a Katyayani will appear, occasionally a Maitreyi will appear. Women are not seen. Brahmana literature, women are not seen. So you're like, what do you do? Where are the women? So you are not finding them in the Vedas, you're not finding them in the Brahmanas, I'm not finding them in Upanishads. So where are they? And I'm searching and I'm not finding them at all. So I said, what do I do? So where do I find the women? Then suddenly when you come to Dharma Shastras, women are there, but they're seen in an inferior position. There are rules of how they should be treated by men. That suddenly starts to appear. And then an occasional Shri Shuktam will appear, a Devi Shuktam. But Shri Shuktam is talking about prosperity. It is not talking about a woman. It's an idea. Prosperity is an idea. It's not a woman. Shri Shuktam is celebration of prosperity. Durga Suktam is not about a goddess. It becomes later. It is Durga is about protection. Protection him. मैं Shakti की पूजा करना. Shakti is a proper noun or a common noun? So Shakti is a proper noun or a common noun? A girl can be named Prosperity. But what does prosperity mean? So you see, you suddenly realize that it's a very different way of looking at, like, what is Shri Shuktam? When you look at Devi Shuktam, so people, if you talk to the cockroaches, they will say it is about women. No, it is not about women. It is about prosperity. It is about strength. It's about abstract concepts. It's not about women. But when you read Tamil literature, women immediately leap in front of you. The first poet, you start reading the poetry, there are poetries. There are poetries of what is known as the household, inside poetries and outside poetries. Poetries inside the house and poetries outside the house. So there's Akam and Puram, inside and outside. So this concept of inside, outside, where are the women? Inside. Where are the men? Outside. Patriarchy hai. It's not that it is not patriarchal, but women are there, they are present. At least around 40 to 50, you can say 50%, chalo. 40%, 50%, women are present. The inside poetry is about romance, about love, about your heart. And outside poetry is about war, about going to war. Masculine, feminine words are clearly defined. Inside, outside, male, female is decided. You don't see this in the Vedas. In the Sama Veda, for example, there is inside, outside. There is Aranya and Grama, the village and the forest, but there's no male and female division. So you see this, when you read Tamil poetry, the women suddenly appear, and they appear very beautiful. It's the 2nd century. You start finding these inside poetry, outside poetry. You suddenly, after a few centuries, you start finding the epics, the Tamil epics, Shillapadikaram. Then there is Mani Meghalai, then there is Kundalakeshi. These are poetries where you find 3 types of women. The woman who is faithful to her husband, the woman who is a courtesan, has many lovers, and a woman who doesn't want lovers, who is a nun, who is a bhikkhuni. And you realize this culture is familiar, suddenly has become familiar with Buddhism and Jainism. Is it referring to Vedas? Yes, it is. It is familiar with the Vedas. It is familiar with Ramayana. It is familiar with Mahabharata. But they are not major forces. They are not big forces. They are there. There is a reference to Brahmins. There is definitely reference to Ramayana. There is reference to Mahabharata. They know the northern kingdoms. They're using words like, they know about Kashi. They know about Arya Desha, which is in the north. But they're talking about, what is interesting is, the women have played a very important role. They're talking about love. The next time you find such poetry of women is again a Prakrit literature known as Hala Shabdashati, which talks about poetry. Maharashtra Prakrit, it's Prakrit poetry. Again, women are playing a very important role. So Sanskrit, these old Sanskrit, the Vedic Sanskrit literature, women are not playing an important role. They start appearing in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata, but again, they are in the background. They are not playing a very central role. Now, so interesting it is. So you are finding this, for me, that's why Tamil women became an important theme. You see the story of Shillapadikaram, it talks about chastity for the first time. A woman who is so chaste, her husband, Kovalan, falls in love with the courtesan, she wastes all his money, then he comes back to her, then both of them decide to travel to another land to start the business again, and they are merchants. See, Ramayana and Mahabharata tells the stories of kings, of rishis. They don't talk about merchants. Tamil poetry talks about merchants. They travel to another place. They are merchants. So this is what happens. So you suddenly find the merchants are talking at the women, and she is giving him capital to start business. She gives her anklet. And she gives her anklet, which is studded with diamonds. And of course, the local goldsmith says that, he has really stolen the queen's anklet. And he claims that this man has stolen the queen's anklets. And he takes it to the king. And the king says, oh, yes, definitely. He takes a quick decision and says, cut his head off. Without checking the king. So there is injustice. She comes there, Kannagi comes there. She comes and says, but my husband was innocent. My anklet is studded with diamonds. Your queen's anklet is studded with pearls. I'm rich. You're not. You have lied. You have taken a decision in a hurry. She gets angry and she uses her power to burn the city of Madurai. Now, where does this power come from? It comes from being chaste, being faithful to a husband. This is the first time you come upon this story of chastity. Women being so powerful because they are faithful to their husbands. What is called Sati Guna. And this concept is there in Ramayana, in Mahabharata, in the same period. And I'm like, hey, this is interesting. You know what is even more interesting? In the Rig Veda, in the Vedas, all the authors are referred to as by their father's name. The son of this one. My father is so and so. My father is so and so. The enemy, Vritra, is considered by his mother's name. So Vritra is Danava, son of Danu. Danu is his mother. Then in Mahabharata and Ramayana, you suddenly find Pandavas being referred to as father's name, Pandu, but also known as Kauntaneya, mother's name. Gandhari, mother's name. And you start wondering, hey, mother's name, father's name. One seems to be patrilineal, the other is matrilineal. Could this have something to do with a different culture? And then you realize that the southern kingdoms which we are talking about the southern, we don't know much about them. Please remember, the southern states and kingdoms emerge much later. The Kadambas, the Gangas, the Pallavas, they come only in the 4th, 5th, 6th century AD. Before that, we don't know much about the southern land. We don't know much about it. We know about this poetry, but we don't know much. So, you see these Tamil works, and I'm saying you're talking about the woman, and you're talking about women's desire. All this is, remember, it is not there in the Vedas, it is not there in the Brahmanas, it is not there in the Upanishads. They're in fact talking about giving up the world, giving up women, becoming tapasvis. That is the language that you're finding emerging in the northern side of the world. In the southern side of the world, you're talking about women, women's power, sati power. You're talking about women's desire. When you read Kundalakeshi's story, now this is a Buddhist story about a woman who falls in love with a criminal who is about to be executed. And she tells her father, a merchant, that please pay whatever you need, but save him because I want to marry him. She desires him. The father, she's stubborn. She tells her father, I want to marry this man. He's a criminal, but I don't care. I love him. She marries him, and after a few years, she gets bored of him. And the husband hates her and she hates him. They get bored. Look at the emotion, how sophisticated the story is. They're talking about relationships which don't work out. And then the husband wants to kill her, and she ends up killing the husband. And then in the end, she becomes a nun. Bhikkhuni. But the story is talking about love, heartbreak. Women's emotions play a very central role. In the Mahabharata, when women have desires, it leads to disaster. In the Ramayana, when women have desires, it leads to disaster. Story of the Kaikai, Surpanakha, Satyavati. Whenever women have desires, it leads to disaster. Suddenly you see the Tamil stories are very different. And you're like, what's going on? It doesn't mean Tamil society is non-patriarchal. Be very careful of this. People make these simplistic divisions. It's never so simple. It's never so simple. In fact, in Sangam poetry, there's reference to a king who, when he defeats an enemy, he takes the women and he cuts their hair and he makes their hair into rope to control mad elephants, his elephants. So the women's hair is cut. So shaving of the head is an insult. So hair plays a very important role. So there is this, if you want to study languages and the difference between languages, you must study a lady called Peggy Mohan. So she has written fantastic books, really fantastic books about women. About language and how language transforms and how Indian languages have emerged, all this Ami, Apan, Dravidian languages, Sanskrit languages, all these words, the complex history of India. Remember, my lectures are complex, they are not simple. If you want simple answers, you should not attend my lectures, you should not. This is meant for sophisticated thinking, who are able to handle complex ideas. Simplistic, I call them cockroaches, please go to Twitter and whatever you want to do. But sophisticated answers. You know, when you read the Tamil poetry, as I said, you find a different world. You know what happened in the 19th century? People believed that there was this continent connecting South India with Madagascar, with Australia, and they called this place Lemuria, and they thought India, South India. North Indians kept saying Aryavarta extends to Arctic, and that is where Sanskrit is spoken. So South Indian Dravidian scholars, Tamil scholars came up with the idea of Lemuria and Kumari Kandam, and they said we extended right up to the South Pole, and there was this big fight happening between North and South. And you know why this started? The reason for this is because the British were interested in racial theory. The British, at that time they were talking about justice, liberty, equality, these new ideas were coming. And much of British wealth was based on slavery. Black slaves, American wealth was based on black slavery. So they needed to justify slavery. So how do we use science to justify slavery? They came up with race theory, the concept of race. And they started looking at the Bible and they started studying race. And that idea even came to India. And suddenly there was this Aryan race and Dravidian race. And North Indian, they said Aryan race came to India and conquered the Dravidian race. And then the South Indian says, that is not true. Dravidians have their own culture and we were very modern and we were very sophisticated and the Aryans came and destroyed us. All these kind of stories came. We really don't know. What we do know is that Lemuria could not have existed. There is no scientific evidence of this place. Although in old Sangam poetry, there is reference to lands being destroyed by tsunamis. And there is the theory is very nice, these theories, Atlantis theory, Lemuria theory, Kumari Kandam theory, of women controlling these great empires. And in South India, please remember, there are stories of queens, very powerful women, very powerful queens. We have stories of Meenakshi Madurai temple, where the queen, you hear of Ram coming down south to save Sita from Ravana. This story everybody in India knows. How many Indians know the story of Queen Meenakshi, who travels north to Kailas to find a husband called Shiva and brings him south, and now he stays next to her in a special temple for Somasundara, and every night he goes to her chambers. So in Meenakshi temple, the queen rules. Again, Tamil women. This concept, when you go to Tulu Nadu is in the southern part of Karnataka, you find stories of a lady called Siri. There is Bhutakola which is performed. Bhutakola is ancestor spirits, and some of the ancestor spirits are women, like Siri. And the story of Siri is very interesting. It has been documented. It's oral tradition. And the oral tradition has been documented. And they speak of a woman who is coming from a rich family, and her husband gives her a sari. And when she gets the sari, she realizes the sari has been worn by another person, and she realizes it has been worn by her husband's mistress. He has having an affair with another woman, and she has worn the sari before, and she says, no, I will not. I demand respect. You cannot give me a sari. She is quite shocked that her husband is having an affair, and she gets angry and she shouts at him in public. And he gets angry. His male ego comes into the picture. He sends her to the father's house for delivery and does not come to fetch her again. The marriage breaks down. She eventually leaves her husband, and it's a tragic story, but then she finds a better husband, and she loses her first husband's child. She marries a second time. Now these stories we are not taught in schools and colleges. We are only talking about Ramayana and Mahabharata. We are not told Tulu stories. We are not told the story of Siri, the legend of Siri. It's a very famous story in Tulu Nadu. Scholars have worked on it, but it's not popular. I read it because I like culture. I love stories. And I want to hear these stories. So again, geography of Tulu Nadu, when was it first told? We don't know. Because we have not maintained a historical record of the story. But you have Siri's story. Now that's a woman's story. Meenakshi's story. Kanyakumari, the southern part of India, they say the goddess Kanyakumari stands there to protect the land from a tsunami. Then again the story comes, the husband was supposed to come from Kailas. He did not come on time. She got angry. She kicked the wedding food on the ground. And therefore, when you go to Kanyakumari, the southern tip of India, the sand over there has many colors. So again, a powerful woman's story. When you go to Kerala, you have Bhagavati Amma. So all these things become interesting. So you find these stories in the South where women are powerful. There's matrilineal system, which means in a patrilineal system, the property goes from father to son, father to son, father to son. In a matrilineal society, it goes from a man, from uncle to nephew, uncle to nephew. So it goes to the sister's children, sister's children. It doesn't go to your son. Now, see in Kerala, there were these two systems. The Nambudri Brahmins came to Kerala from North India. They got some land. The eldest son would be married and the property would go only to the eldest son. What about the second son and the third son? They were told you cannot marry. You can have relations with the local Nair women, and the child and the property goes in the Nair women, the property goes to the nephew. Property goes to the nephew. So you have two systems, one where the property goes to the son and one where the property goes to the nephews. The Nair system and the Nambudri systems. So it shows two different systems. Now, even more amazing, when you go to Harappa, and I've read this wonderful book by this, again written by an IAS officer. It's called Journey of a Civilization, Indus to Vaigai. And it's a fabulous story. I mean, when you read this book, it is like superb. It connects Harappa's civilization. It connects Harappa with Sangam literature. Now remember, Harappa ceased to exist in 1900 BC. Sangam poetry is around 300 BC. So there is 1500 years gap between Sangam poetry and Harappa. And the distance between Harappa region, that is northwest India, and where Sangam is there is 1500 kilometers. So 1500 kilometers, 1500 years apart. Yet when you read Sangam poetry, you get a feeling these people were familiar with Harappa. So his hypothesis is when the Harappa cities collapsed, some of the people migrated south and may have come all the way till Tamil Nadu. Some, not all. Some may have traveled to Ganga, some may have traveled to Odisha, we don't know. Many places they would have gone. But when the cities collapsed, some people, because they were traders, they were traders. We know for a fact that much of the Harappan economy was based on mercantile activities. Now, what are the proof of that? In the Vedas, the east is very important. East is auspicious. Purva. Purva. But when you look at Harappa, the most powerful citadel, where the rich people live or the powerful people live, is a gated community on the western side. The lower cities on the eastern side. The higher cities on the western side. Now in the Vedas, all good things are on the east or in the north. Ishanakon, north, east. So that, but here they will say that west citadel is where the powerful people live and east is where the lower city is. And that architecture is there in Sangam poetry, apparently. I don't read Tamil, but there is a reference to that. Then red pottery which is found in Indus is found in Tamil Nadu. Sangam poetry has references, lots of references to bullfighting, Jallikettu. Where do you find it? In Harappan seals. One of the unique features of Harappan civilization is women wore bangles a lot and anklets and bangles. Nowhere in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, you don't find bangles. What is the biggest story in Tamil Nadu? Shillapadikaram, anklet. The anklet of the goddess. The women are buried with bangles on their left arm. On the left arm. And what are women called in India always? Vamangi, she who sits on the left side. All this is suggesting some connection between Harappa and these cultures in the south. Some matrilineal structure, because we also know in Harappa the buried bodies that we found, the women are more related to each other than the men, which suggests that these women after marriage did not leave the parents' house. Unlike today, जब शादी होती है तो लड़की किसी दूसरे घर चली जाती है. But in the Harappa, probably the women stayed in the same place, and therefore does property go from man to nephew, from uncle to nephew, or father to son? Now that's an interesting question to ask. So you suddenly find connections. How true it is scientific, so you can't be 100% sure about these things. You get excited by these ideas. But look at this today, in this conversation today on Tamil women, we traveled from Tamil Nadu to Harappa. We traveled 1500 kilometers, we traveled 1500 years. We saw stories of Shilapadikaram, we saw stories of Mani Meghalai, the story of a woman who wants to be a nun, who is like, she likes a man, but she's like, you know what, I don't want to marry, I don't want to be a courtesan, I want to be a nun. She's taking a choice. I don't want to be a courtesan, I don't want to have lovers. And this man is obsessed with her, he wants to marry her. She likes him, but she's not sure she wants to be with him. And that story is a beautiful story. Mani Meghalai, a woman taking her decision, and she's trying, and the gods are helping her, saying that if you don't want to marry, it's okay. Or about Kundalakeshi, the story of a woman who wants to marry a criminal, and the father says, okay, theek hai, meri beti hai, usko shaadi kara dete hain. You know, what lovely stories. Why are they are not there in the Vedas? As I said, if I read the Vedas, 90% men, 10% women. When I read the Tamil poetry, the early Tamil poetry, I'm finding 50% men, 50% women. It changes, of course. Even in Shilapadikaram, you see women playing a very important role. Ramayana, Mahabharata about men, right? Ram, Krishna, Pandavas, Kauravas. Women are on the sidelines. But you see the shifting. Like even in the Mahabharata, Ganga is very powerful. The next Satyavati is less powerful. After Satyavati, Amba, Ambika have less power. The power keeps going down. The power of the women is going down. Something is shifting in the society, right? As time is passing. Something is changing. And that is what it is interesting. What I find interesting, again in Tamil poetry, is the third period. You remember, Tamil poetry is 3 phases. The first phase, I say 300 years, 300 years, 300 years. So the first 300 years, you have relatively secular poetry. Gods are not playing an important role. Women and men fighting about inside and outside, love and war. The second period is when you have these Buddhist epics and Jain epics emerging. Of Shilapadikaram, Mani Meghalai. And then comes the third period of Bhakti. And then Hinduism emerges. A new form of idea emerges. Bhakti as an idea emerges. And Bhakti emerges from southern India. Although it is referred to in the Bhagavad Gita, it is really a southern idea which comes to the north. So Vedas come from north to south. Buddhism comes from north to south. Agastya Muni comes from north to south. What goes from south to north? Bhakti goes from south to north. Shankaracharya goes from south to north. Vallabhacharya goes from south to north. Ramanujacharya goes from south to north. That is the idea from south to north. And the Bhakti poetry takes the form of Alvars and Nayanars. Alvars who are talking to Vishnu. Nayanars who are talking of Shiva. They're talking about Andal's poetry. Andal is the 6th or 7th century maybe. I mean, the dates are very difficult to find out, but it is at least 1,000 years before Mirabai. She's talking about her love for Krishna, her love for Perumal, her love for Vishnu. You read the poetry of Akka Mahadevi. Not Akka Mahadevi, so even before that, you have got Karaikalamayar, the woman whose husband says, you know what, you are all this time into puja part and gods and all that, I don't want to be like you very much, I'll go to my other wife. He goes to the other wife, so she says, I'm so happy the husband has left me, now I can focus on Shiva. And she makes herself ugly so that no man pays attention to her. Karaikalamayar's story comes, Kannappa's story comes. And you know what is interesting in these stories? Again, a difference will come in Tamil poetry. And it emerges. The gods are located to a geographical position. Suddenly, the god is located in a particular village or a city. You don't find this in Vedic. Indra, Soma, Agni, they don't belong to a particular geography. Ram belongs to Ayodhya, but then Ram is presented as a historical character. Vaikuntha has no location. Kailasa is broadly in the north. Varaha has no geographical location. Narasimha has no geographical location. But the moment you start reading Bhakti poetry in the south, when you start reading the main poetries where they are referring to the shrines of the gods, they are referring to villages, they are referring to towns, they are saying this is where this god lives, this is where this god lives, next to this river, on this top of this mountain, in this cave. Geography starts to become very, very important in these poetries. The poetries become important. The poetries talk of geography. Bhakti movement locates God in earth. Mountains become important, rivers. God is located in this village, God is located in that village. Your Tirupati is found in the seven hills. Pandharpur, Vitthal is found in Pandharpur, Jagannath is found in Puri. See how geography becomes important. When you say Krishna, it is abstract, it can exist anywhere. But the moment you say Srinathji, it is very specifically Nathadwara in Rajasthan. When you say Tirupati Balaji, you mean refer to Andhra Pradesh, you talk to the seven hills. So suddenly location, geography becomes important, and that idea comes again from Tamil Nadu. So this is a very big difference, a shift in thinking. Geography brings a shift in thinking. Geography comes into the picture. So when you study culture, you have to see it from Desha Kala Guna. From Desha, you have to see North India, South India, you have to see East India, West India. Kala, you have to understand ancient period. When you talk of Vedic Kala, but Tamil poetry and all come much later. Vedic Kala is almost, how much? 3,500 years ago. When you're talking about Tamil poetry, 2 to 2,500 years ago. Before that, there was, of course, a culture, but we don't know much about it because we don't have written material. We don't have much material on it. Then you have to look at time period, right? I told you about time. Like I said, the cities, the temples are built in the 6th and 7th century, the early temples. Before that, you have caves, Buddhist caves, again, historically. And Guna, men and women, you have to see the difference. So when I read Vedic literature, I'm saying, hey, where are the men? Men are in the foreground, women are in the background. When I read Tamil literature, women are also in the foreground. But gradually they start to disappear. The women start to disappear. In the Bhakti poetry, Andal is the only woman in the Alvars. Only woman. In the Nayamnars, there is only Karaikalamayar. One woman. Suddenly the women start to go in the background. They go away. They start disappearing. The men, the masculine force emerges. You know, that is what is interesting. The government of India decided that property should pass from father to son, not from uncle to nephew. Why? Who made this rule? Why the old systems were destroyed? What about women who want to transmit their, the courtesans used to transmit the property to their daughters. There was no man involved. The woman, the courtesans were singers, dancers, they had a lot of wealth, they were bankers, they lived in temples. They would give all their property to their daughters, not to the son, to the daughters. This system is not there in the government of India. So the government of India has ignored the old matrilineal systems, has ignored so many other systems. So Indian culture, so we have to remember these things. These stories are very interesting. So there are many, many, many more things, but I just wanted you to be introduced to these ideas. And if you are a UPSC student, do consider buying these books. These are interesting. It is divided, as I said, in history, geography. We'll go into details, much more details. Today we will, this sessions, these are done every Sunday at 4 o'clock. We have done this today. I think many students from Sophia have seen it. Many students from people from Indian Express must have seen this. We do this for different people. 4 o'clock, once a week only I can manage. But today I just want, and I only give you a glimpse of it. It's all extempore. There's no planning. I talk about what I explore, how I search Indian history. What do I learn? No agenda. No agenda at all. It's just pure pleasure. Bhoga vilasa. It is not vidhi anushtan. It is not these rules. It is about bhoga vilas. Because I enjoy knowledge. I enjoy exploration. And all knowledge can refine itself. Some of you all will have new ideas, different ideas. Different scholars have written books. As I said, Peggy Mohan for language. And then they want to understand the connection between Harappa and the Sangam poetry. Then if you want to read about Andal, you want to read, there are lots of websites, you can do that. Just go to devdutt.com and you'll find articles on some of these topics. You'll realize that, India is not a homogeneous, everything is the same. It is not. It's very, very different. Remember how Hindi ka hum is only one word. There is no apan or amhi. There is no inclusive V and exclusive V. Why is this difference there? What does it say about culture? So these are things that you must study whenever you have the time. I hope you enjoy it. And don't look for simple answers. If people are giving you simple answers, don't trust them. Yeah? Life is simple, but it is based on a lot of layers and ideas. But it's not simplistic. Simple and simplistic mein bahut fark hota hai. So I want you all to think sophisticated, be refined. And if you have a refined mind, you will live a happy life, even in the lockdown. And that's the purpose of these sessions. So when we have tea time tales, we want to refine your mind with Lakshmi, Durga and Saraswati. Yeah. Next time we'll talk on some other topic. If you have suggestions, I keep looking at some of your suggestions. I don't engage with a lot of the comments because sometimes people distract you. They are attention seekers. उनको दुर्गा चाहिए. मैं दुर्गा देने नहीं वाला हूँ because this is Saraswati वाला session and there's no Lakshmi in this. So it is only Saraswati. It's only pleasure. So if somebody wants to attain Durga by irritating me through these messages, I ignore them. So I keep talking on what I have done this week. Next week, I don't know what I'll do, but you will surely hear it through the advertising and hope to see you next week. Namaskar. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the session on Tamil women.